Hello, my name's Giles Stapleton. I'm the host of the new podcast, Cross-Examination. The purpose of the podcast is to bring the law to life, and in doing so, I will demystify laws, lawyers, and legal systems. And today I have with me Mick Bainbridge. Mick is a solicitor in New South Wales. He's the current president of the New South Wales branch of the RSL, and he's also a former army soldier, commando in the Green Beret. So I'm going to talk to Mick today about his life and his story up to today. Mick, welcome, and thanks for coming all the way from Wollongong today.
Thanks for having me, Giles.
So we know each other through the legal profession. You're currently a practicing solicitor in New South Wales?
Yep, currently for now.
Yeah, and how long have you been a solicitor for?
About 7 years now. So it's been a pretty wild and fast ride.
But when you say for now, that has an indication of a possible, termination of that job and doing something else. Is that?
I guess from my old career in the military, I attached a lot of my identity to it. So I struggled when I left.
Yes.
And I sort of promised myself I never would. So
that you would never,
attach too much of this role to my identity. So, if the opportunity came up, I think law is a great springboard into other things.
Yes.
And I think, whilst originally I didn't like change as much transitioning from defence, I think it's become part of who I am. So I might stick at law, I might do that and a few other things. And I think RSL is probably a good indicator of that.
Other things you can do and are interested in.
I think law is a good baseline to go into essentially any role or career or startup. And I keep it flexible, but for the meantime, I keep buying lottery tickets. So I'll see if anything changes there.
Yeah, well, I can relate to that. Personally, when I did my studies in England, I thought when I got my results that doing law would be a good idea.
Yep.
Never thought about studying law in the past, and I didn't even know that I wanted to be a lawyer at all. So I think it's exactly right that the law degree and the foundations of a legal education are fantastic in life.
Yes,
and you found that, but you studied law late, didn't you?
Yeah, I studied in my early 30s. So
yes.
I left defence and was supported by Veteran Affairs.
Okay.
I was a bit disheartened at the time that I was one of the first people really to come out publicly and talk about mental health and defence. And obviously I'd had a fairly kinetic experience in Afghanistan with 4 tours as a Green Beret and leaving, I sort of put my hand up and said I needed help. At the time, it wasn't really a position that defence catered for. But
when you say position, you mean the state of mind and the state that you were in as a result of your time in the army?
Yeah, just loading. Look, at the time, sorry, I'll go back. So
just please, just talk as much as you like.
I guess when I left defence, obviously I'd had significant war service injuries, like physical and my mental health was a bit out of check with PTSD and the likes. But I made it pretty clear to Veteran Affairs, don't just give me a pension. I don't want to sit at home. Give me an opportunity. And they did just that. And they paid for my law and commerce degree. And
really,
it was a fantastic opportunity to decompress, meet new people and have fun.
All right. So can I stop you there? I think the thing for me about you is your story of morphing from a teenager into an army guy into a seriously hardcore soldier into a lawyer who's now, doing all the stuff that you can for veterans. But can we go back to you as a teenager, you as a 13-year-old? Where were you and what were you like?
I think I was probably a bit of a rascal. I grew up in southwest Sydney. I was a middle child. I had an older brother, Tim, and younger sister, Laura. And my old man was a mechanic and mum helped run that business with my father. And, we were just middle class, middle road. It was a good childhood. We didn't have much, but mum and dad always made sure we had everything we needed. So,
which is a very common story for Australian people that become famous, like cricketers and rugby players. So what was the rascal character in you at 13 and beyond?
Look, school wasn't really for me. Riding motorbikes around, often to school and
without a license.
Yes. It was one of my I think I just didn't really fit the mold. I didn't fit the way I was being taught, and going to uni as in my 30s, I had to really. The first lesson was learning how I learn, in effect.
And what about, because I've seen Tim, your brother, talk about you on Australian Story. What was he different from you, or was he similar?
He was a lot smarter.
Was he?
Probably not as good looking, but but a lot smarter, a lot more probably well put together and designed for that system. I struggled a lot at school. I probably had a touch of dyslexia that made me turn away from it more than lean into it.
Okay.
And I've had to remedy a lot of those things in my own approach
to
as
life.
I've gotten older. Yes, yeah. So
then did you leave school at 16 or did you get through and do HSC?
I was going to leave school in year 10. I'd been offered a builder's apprenticeship and I in year 11 lost my license.
Driving license?
Yes. I didn't have P plates
Before
on my car.
You actually had it by then.
I had my P plates.
Yeah.
So I stayed in. I knew I was going to join defence.
When you say you knew though, how did you know? I
think I'd just grown up thinking that there was something bigger than myself to serve. I never thought I'd go to a war or anything like that. I think it was inside my heart. I was always going to pursue it.
Yep.
And from probably about year 11 or even year 10, I would get home, I would load house bricks into a backpack and go for a walk. And I remember my mother always saying, you'll ruin your back. And, jokes on her. I've now had a spinal reconstruction and learned to walk differently.
But not because of the bricks. That was because of other things that we'll get to.
It was something I worked towards.
Yeah.
I went to Defence Force recruiting. They'd offered me to become an officer.
Can we stop there though?
Yep.
Just when you say you'd gone to, how did you did you do it in consultation with your parents or did you just say, no, I'm going to look this up and I'm going to go knock on their door? Yeah,
I just wanted to follow it. I guess I had the idea I'd do it younger while I could and maybe get out later and become a builder or something.
Okay.
But I'm not sure where the drive came from. Just we had family members that had been in defence and I was, as a young kid, quite interested in their stories and I just thought maybe that's for me. And
so what practical step did you take to make the first move to getting into the Defence Force?
I went to a few open days,
okay.
Participated with their information sessions.
Yep.
And I think that it was somewhat of a comforting factor knowing I wasn't doing too well at school, but I had something I was passionate about to go to and university just seemed too far out of reach. My brother, on the other hand, went to university, became a town planner and really lent into it.
Yep.
And for me, I just picked that different path.
Okay, so how did you cross the line metaphorically from I'm here to joining, and what was the process that you went through to actually join, and what was the first job you got?
I called Defence Force recruiting. I'd booked some information days that my mother attended with me. At the time I couldn't drive. And I remember being quite clear about wanting to be a commando. And I remember the recruitment officer asking me to pick a few different trades. And I was adamant I didn't want to end up, as a transport driver or a cook or I knew what I wanted. And
can I ask you about that though?
Yeah.
So to me, I'm not really sure what a commando is.
Yeah.
I grew up in a different country in the UK and I know about the SAS and the SBS, but what is it? What did you understand before you said you wanted to be a commando, that a commando would be as distinct from another job?
Yeah, I think the role has changed over time, but for me, when I'd looked up, I'd followed the stories of the crate and the commandos who paddled into Singapore with their Klepper kayaks and destroyed a lot of the Japanese warships. I'd sort of grown up on listening to that story, and funnily enough, my father as a mechanic had older clients that were POWs and
Really?
ex-commandos from Sparrow Force, and were in Timor and in the 40s. So I would love going to my father's work and hearing their stories, and it was just I think it affected me in such a way that I became a little bit obsessed with that outcome. And when the commando unit was raised around the time I was in high school, it became more of a position that I felt was for me.
So what is it though? What specifically is a commando as distinct from other jobs in the military?
Well, they're obviously part of the Special Forces group.
Okay.
The SAS is another part. And I guess probably the simplest term is they were always doing a lot of reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, and I guess at the time it's a breakdown, and I'm sure that I'll be criticised for having this view, but the commandos they'd go in heavy, they'd stick around for the fight and stay until it was done.
So you're actually in hardcore armed combat.
Yeah, kinetic fighting.
Kinetic being the physical fighting. So we're not talking about wrestling on the ground. We're talking about, unfortunately, people shooting each other at
kinetic
each other.
Combat operations, two-way range, room-to-room combat.
So walking into a building where you don't know someone's there, that type of thing, and going around the corner. The sort of stuff you see on TV obviously as a metaphor, but it's actually real.
Yes, absolutely.
Mick, a commando is a soldier as distinct from an officer. Is that correct? Am I right about that? Or are they both?
Every unit has both. So we had officers. They would come in and do postings and stay in the unit and work their way up, the same as we would. But the Special Forces, I think the rank structure was a lot slower. If people came to the commandos from the bigger army and they were, say, a sergeant or a corporal, they would generally lose that rank and start again.
Okay.
So there was a lot of experience, there was a lot of knowledge, and collectively it was probably one of the most experienced units in defence.
So then how did you get selected for that? What is the process, and what did you have to personally do in order to get selected?
At the time, there was a program called direct entry, and a lot of people were critical of it, but I think it was the actual lifeblood of the unit. It brought people from all walks of life. So you could sign up. I'd finished my Kapooka training where you go in as a recruit. I hated life. It was a really average experience.
Is that like my son actually joined the Navy about 6 months ago. You go in for the first day. There's your bed. The alarm goes off. At sort of 4 a.m, and you've got 3 minutes to go to the loo and be on the parade ground.
That sounds quite civilised, actually. Kapooka was, I remember it was funny because they'd tell people in the recruitment stuff that, in the programs that you could play golf. So I remember someone rocked up with golf clubs, just funny things like that. And then we hopped off the bus and they were just in your face yelling at you. And,
really,
by the end of that day, your head shaved.
By them, not by you.
Yeah. And then you would wake up to them screaming your hallway number, and you'd pull the bottom sheet off your bed, have it over your shoulder and stand in the hallway.
Wow.
I look back, it was funny now.
How many weeks was that?
I think it was about 7 or 8 weeks.
Okay.
But for a first run at a first sort of real job outside of school, I thought, what have I got myself into?
But this is sort of during the age that you're at year 11, because you left school by this point.
I finished year 12.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I worked really hard, did well in my exams, but my overall mark had let me down.
Okay.
Finished school. The next day I was on a bus. I think it was Liverpool Street in Sydney. Hopped on a bus and went. So I missed out on schoolies, missed out on Christmas, which was, I guess a level of commitment for someone that age.
Yeah. Did you feel anxious? Like when you got on that bus, did you think to yourself, what have I done at that point? Or was it only when you got off the bus?
Probably the whole time.
Okay.
The first few weeks, it's a real shock to the system.
Yeah.
They're basically, I guess, in essence, remolding you from a civilian mindset to that defence.
Yeah.
Their rule is everyone's a soldier first.
Yes.
It was it was an experience and a half.
But you finished that.
Yeah, finished
and then
that.
How do you go from Kapooka to the direct entry of the next stage?
Well, I went to Singleton, to the infantry training school there.
Yep.
And there was a program called this direct entry scheme. So I went and joined it. And at the time, I was one of the youngest, if not close to the youngest guy to do a barrier test. There was, I think probably 9 months worth of training at Singleton before I got to that point.
So you have to do the training in order to be fit for the barrier test, and the barrier test is the entry into whether or not you're going to make the next phase.
Yeah, you do all your training to become qualified as an infantry soldier.
Okay.
And then you can either go out to the battalions, or at the time I did this direct entry program, which was an extra course.
Yep.
And they would teach you everything from patrolling to, different bush skills to, assaulting to weapon systems. And then I went on to do the barrier test, which was...
Can I just ask, though, in that, after finishing Kapooka and before going on to your next infantry thing, was it clear to you that that's exactly what you wanted to do, or were you still a bit sort of unclear and uncertain?
It's hard because you train in a way, I guess once you get to that point, you want to go and, be a part of this bigger thing.
Yep.
You're not necessarily really sure what that means. I guess at the time they didn't really advertise what their skill set was. You would learn as you go. But I guess I knew I belonged there. I was happy.
Yeah. Were you missing home?
At times, but I was a young, early, not even 20 yet.
Yeah.
I was just learning. I was pretty young for the platoon. There was a lot of older guys around me. So I've always had that benefit of learning from people around me. You had, everyone from, their mid to late 30s right down to my age. So,
were you sort of, did you attract any attention because you were so young among people? Or was
yes, they call that in defence drawing the crabs. And I drew plenty of crabs.
The crab being?
Yeah, just asking a stupid question or doing something the wrong way. You would have the spotlight on you and you'd be hammered. But in essence, it was a good way to learn. You learn the hard and fast rules of being a soldier, and it becomes a part of your identity because
within you personally, like it. Yeah, it's a sort of I suppose a resilience that's developed and a growth in character that then gives you confidence and belief and excitement.
That's true. I think there's positives to it because you really, you become every part of that role and you believe in it.
Yeah.
And in a role like that, ultimately at the end of the day, you're potentially being sent somewhere to die for your country. So a little bit of belief in what you're doing is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think the negative is when you do leave later, it's harder to readjust that identity system
back to normal.
Being a parent or being I don't really introduce myself as a veteran or as a solicitor. I'd probably be more akin to say that I'm a father or pretty easygoing guy. You know what I mean? But at the time, you have to really, throw yourself into the stream and go with it.
So talk about the day that you were a commando, the first day. How did that feel?
It was pretty amazing getting your Green Beret and you had to do your selection courses and a few insertion and extraction courses and like those baseline fundamentals as part of what they call the reinforcement cycle, which can go for sometimes a couple of years between courses and breaks.
And what's a reinforcement cycle? Is that just...
So when you pass your barrier test, that's a 3-day sort of grueling physical test to get the opportunity to do the selection course or the barrier course or whatever they call it now. I think it's changed about 8 times.
Is that to sort of signify the absolute sort of, I suppose, barrier to overcome in order to get there? It's like a metaphor for the difficulty in the process to go through.
I think it went for about 6 weeks. You do a whole range of issues from just being tired, and you learn different weapon systems, different tactics, different strategies. Lots of carrying heavy stuff. They had a thing called demarcation where you wouldn't sleep for 3 or more days and you don't eat, and they really put you under stress to see how you respond. And then you do funny little things like you might not have a watch for periods of time, so you have to get used to that panic of what's next. So I think there's a big part of just really assessing the humans that are on the course to see if they're the right people for the job.
But within all of that, how do your emotions flow from sort of, this is something I've got to handle and I'll get there, and just push yourself on, versus the conflict between that, saying, oh my God, what am I doing? I hate this.
Yeah.
How close do you get to pulling out?
A lot of the time, it's probably goes through everyone's mind.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Guys would hop in trucks, be dropped off, do a pack march, think that's the last pack march. They have the truck there, and the truck would drive them back to the start. And you'd do that 3 or 4 times, perhaps, and people would quit. And I remember at the end, you'd walk around the corner and the truck was there, and that was it. And people had just quit in that last half an hour and missed out.
And when you say quit, that means quit for good. That's it. You're done. Yep. It's like you quit once and you're out.
Off the selection. They can come back later if they have an injury. I think there's some circumstances where people are told not to come back.
Sure.
But, look, I think, looking back, it was one of the hardest things I'd done. I still enjoyed it. But I think nowadays they're a lot more professional. They're a lot fitter. There's a lot more science behind how they're stress testing people. I think if I had to do it today, I probably wouldn't pass. But back then it was just about, turning your mind off and getting the job done.
So thank you. That's incredible. Obviously then you've been to Afghanistan on 4 tours, I think.
Yep.
Now, so is that the only place that you've been in that form of conflict, or have you been elsewhere?
No, in 2006, my first trip was to East Timor.
Okay.
There was the riots and unrest over there, and we thought that we'd fly up. I thought that I'd be there for 2 or 3 days max. I think I came home about 6 or 7 months later.
Yeah.
And it was a good entry point. It was like an adolescence in the military. It was a good hard tour, but a good opportunity to really test our skills and our ability to do the job, especially as I think I was 21 in Timor, to then come home and the next year go to Afghanistan.
So, but in Timor, what sort of experiences did you have in the actual process of, I suppose, conflict, as opposed to monitoring and maintaining a position? Was there actual, sort of conflict that you were engaged in as a soldier?
There was riots and the like. Like we evacuated the Australian embassy there. It was quite vicious. I think there was a lot of influence from different forces there that were involved, causing a lot. Excuse me. Perhaps causing a lot of the unrest, but no real gunfights, no real serious stoushes that we had. There were a few later, but none that I was involved in.
So your personal safety was never under threat there, or
I think it is, because it's you're a soldier and you're not sure what
anything
the outcome
can happen.
Of those things. We always were concerned that people had weapons in the crowds. But most of the time they were just, local gangs fighting it out. So we brought stability. There was a guy called Ronaldo that we it was probably the first time I saw the political intervention of what special forces can inject into a nation that we're trying to influence. And that was, I think at the time the Prime Minister was arrested in Timor. Yes. And there was another front runner for that role. And we would come in and prop them up and, pick the winning horse, so to speak, to have that influence in the area. And, and unfortunately, I feel like we did a pretty good job, but he got a little bit big for his boots with, I think, the next group that went over and took over from us. And there was a gunfight, and that person was killed in that gunfight.
That replacement Prime Minister?
Yes.
Wow.
So,
that's history that's well beyond my memory. But wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was, I probably didn't realise it then at the time. Looking back, it's quite an interesting thing to be doing as a 21-year-old in a foreign nation. So, and then that also was a similar blueprint to what we had in Afghanistan. So
can I ask you though, when you got back from Timor, were you married by 21, or was that something?
No, I wasn't married.
Yeah.
I was sort of just enjoying.
Came home to mum and dad, or came home to a base in Sydney or somewhere?
I came home. I was living on the base for some time at Holsworthy, which is a pretty, at the time, was pretty depressing sort of place. It's a lot better now. Yeah. But I stayed away from Moorebank Sporties. There's been a lot of military love stories there that probably come back as family law matters nowadays. But
you go and put your business card around there.
Yeah, we should actually. Yeah, but no, look, I think I was just fully immersed in what I was doing. I obviously had girlfriends here and there, but it was a fairly transient lifestyle. And then I had my own place. And rented and used to ride my bike to Holsworthy, train, and I can't believe the fitness level I had then compared to now. So,
and were you sort of slightly obsessive in your own fitness and like a really full-on trainer and
I think
athlete?
I wouldn't say athlete. I certainly wasn't the fittest person there. I was probably one of the slowest runners, terrible runner, great swimmer. But so like it sort of levels itself out.
Yes.
But I think the fitness came with making your job easier.
Must do. And then, so do you remember the call that you're going to Afghanistan and how you felt about that?
I missed out on a trip in 2006 to Afghanistan and I just remember being a bit heartbroken about that.
Yeah.
Timor came up, but I think it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And then when I went in 2007 to Afghanistan, had the call, did the prep for the few months and went over. It was a completely different ball game. I was with all the same people that I'd worked with for those years prior. So I was confident in our team and our ability, but that was really just going into the Badlands.
So what was the purpose of the trip that you had to do?
Kinetic fighting operations, clearing territory so our other Australian elements, force elements could build schools and, assist the local community.
So you're effectively going over there to fight the Taliban and keep the Taliban away from I don't know what the proper description is, but Afghanistani population that's not the Taliban. In other words, the citizens and the normal people.
Yeah, we were based in like a town called Tarankot or Taramkout. Everyone has their own way of saying it. But, we went in. Again, I think I was about 22. It was just ultimately a super confronting experience. It was exciting. And not in a weird way. I guess it's the way that anyone would train for a football grand final. You want your opportunity to ply your trade and
everything you've been working towards.
That's it. Yeah.
But even though that is the case, did the actual realisation that you were there and the actual realities that you're confronting make you think twice or think
absolutely.
differently?
Look, there was a bit of boyish sort of approach to it. We hadn't lost anyone yet. We'd had troops over there in the year prior. There was some, kinetic exchanges, some gunfights, and I guess we went into it knowing exactly what to expect, but also we hadn't suffered any of the heavy losses or, so we were still quite our ideals were that we were in there and we're going to change
positive
it.
and optimistic.
Yes, absolutely.
And how many were there of you in your group?
I think there was about 45 of us.
Yeah.
A couple platoons, some snipers, and the
what
mortar
was your
crews.
role personally?
I was a gunner in one of the cars. So I was a man in a 50 cal in the back of one of the Land Rovers, and operating some mortar tubes with the team. So
a mortar tube is
they're like a big metal tube with a bipod, and you see people on the news probably dropping bombs down the tube, and probably gives me a better understanding of why I'm half deaf these days. And
so we're talking about you're in the back of a Land Rover with a few other people doing the same job.
Yep.
In uniform, driving, patrolling places, and if there is a confrontation, you're basically on your own. Sorry, you're on your own feet, running around, hiding, shooting, protecting.
Yeah. So we at the time, IEDs, so improvised explosive devices, were a threat over there. But in 2007. When I look back, I don't think that they'd proliferated as much. The technology from Iraq hadn't really transferred to Afghanistan.
Sorry to stop you, but do you mean these are devices used by the Taliban against you, and you're working out how prolific they are and how to defend yourselves against those because you can't see them and you've got to anticipate where they are?
Yeah, so we had these Land Rovers, we called them SRVs, and we would have either a 50 cal machine gun on the back or a Mark 19 grenade launcher. You'd have a driver with another a machine gun called a Mag 58 or a passenger and a driver. And these vehicles, I'll give you some images, but they were just completely overloaded with bombs and ammunition. And
the cars were that you were driving around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how many of you in one of these?
Three in each vehicle.
And how many vehicles?
Sometimes we'd go out with sort of 15 plus vehicles.
Really?
We'd split up. But at the time, like I was saying, with the improvised explosives that the Taliban were using, they were common, but they weren't as common back then. It wasn't such a big threat that would stop us in later years being in essentially a soft-skinned vehicle. Which were
as opposed to a tank, you mean?
Yes, or a Bushmaster, the big Australian vehicles. They've got like almost like a boat hull underneath them that's full of water, and that would disperse the explosive impact of those blasts hitting the vehicles with people inside them. So we would go out for 30 plus days, and your uniforms would be almost stand up on their own by the time you come back.
So let's just get precise about that. You'd go out for 30 days. So you leave a base for a trip for 30 days where water, food, clothing,
everything, we were self-sustaining.
In that vehicle as a group of 15 trucks or whatever. And you find a place to sleep at night. Under the stars, under a canvas.
The stars were amazing. So, we would go out. We didn't really have air assets at the time, so the base was pretty slim on assets.
By air assets, you mean planes protecting you?
Fast jets, fighter jets that we had guys in our teams called JTACs that could radio through, speak to the jet pilots, and we could call fire on various positions to support us in an ambush or a gunfight. But it was difficult at the time because we would go out on these long patrols, and the spotting systems of the Taliban were quite well put together. So they would know where we were going. They would predict where we were going to be.
Really?
And then, in essence, be able to set ambushes for us along the way.
That's terrifying for the average individual. So how do you emotionally cope with that as you're driving along and hearing everything on the radio? It's,
looking back now, I always say that because I think my view on it all changes as I get older. But I thought it was pretty incredible. I thought it was exciting. I think you want to get your first gunfight out of the way. You have what they call nursery patrols, and you would go out and the Taliban would never really engage unless they had a strategic upper hand. And I think after a while, our group in particular got known for being pretty hard-ended fighters. So the Taliban would often choose, when we would listen to their communications, not to engage with us because they'd rather live another day. So we built a pretty strong reputation, and I think I'd like to think we built a lot of respect for the Taliban fighters, and we probably had a lot for them as well.
Okay. So talk to us about, let me rephrase that. You have reasonably well documented conversations with people about PTSD as a result of your time. Can you give me an example of an experience, if it's not too difficult, that you look back on and go, well, I have some of these effects on me now in my life as a result of that incident? Is there anything you can think of? Yeah,
look, I obviously completed my 1 tour to Timor, 4 tours to Afghanistan, and then time on basically the federal domestic counterterrorism team they call TAG East. My roles were fairly different every time I went to Afghanistan. So on my first 2 tours were kinetic combat operations, and then my 3rd tour was living with a warlord. And my 4th tour was looking after Australian Prime Ministers coming in and out. So essentially working in their, for want of a better term, their bodyguard team. It was an interesting change. But the one, probably a few matters stick out for me most. Training in Australia before my 3rd tour away, we had the death of Mason Edwards, who was killed in Koltana in South Australia. We would always train with live fire, so using live ammunition. It was the only way to sort of get a really good experience out of the training to prepare us. It was unfortunate, and it was really a heartbreaking scenario. Just a few things that could have gone wrong went wrong.
So he was killed in practice? In practice,
in training. And I think,
And you were a direct witness of that?
I was on that team. So I was the explosive entry guy. I had my gear ready to make entry on this mock-up target. And as we were pulling around the target, another team had come through and fired on their target, and a bullet had come through the wall and shot one member, I believe, in the hand or arm, and Mason copped one in the head behind the ears.
So hang on. So this is not shooting at individuals, obviously, but it's shooting at a target, and just unfortunately where Mason was in line with that, and the bullet came through the wall.
Wow. So they would go to Koltana in South Australia because it was similar sort of terrain, but the targetry was set up in such a way that there was a bit of a slight time delay. And in essence, that experience was probably my first foray into the law, because they had an inquiry after, and I'd never sat really in a courtroom other than when I lost my license as a young kid.
When there's not a lot to say, is it? Really?
Yeah, well, it was an odd experience having 9 odd barristers question me and then cross-examine me.
So you were a witness?
Yes.
And what, if you don't mind me asking, what was it you were a witness of?
Well, I didn't see the event, but because I'd worked on Mason trying to keep him with us, it obviously didn't work.
So you were there giving Mason life
CPR, and all, holding him steady and getting him to the paramedic landing zone. So they brought a helicopter in. But it was for me, it was my first real sort of trauma from defence. You live and work with these people for years, and you become ultimately, like brothers. And then we recovered after that. It was quite a negative experience at the inquiry with defence.
So the barristers were from the private bar, or were they defence barristers?
Defence sort of reservists.
Yep.
And it was an interesting way to have that introduction into the law. I certainly wasn't fond of it by that time. But I found personally a huge disconnect between what lawyers and barristers might read about a certain profession and dots that they might connect that aren't realistic or not fundamentally part of the...
So you're talking now about this, if you like, the theme that's put to you as a witness by a barrister.
Yes.
And based on their perspective of your job.
Yes.
Right.
And I think it probably identifies to me how important it is, even as a solicitor, if you're acting for a client, you have to know their business, or you have to understand the intricacies of why things aren't done the way it might show in an instruction booklet. because there are practicalities around that. And
if they are ignored or not understood or not ventilated and appreciated, then an injustice could occur.
Yes, yeah.
So did that occur in this inquiry as far as you're concerned?
I'm firmly of the view it did.
Yeah. And how?
Well, look, there was training in terms of, in defence you have these little booklets called PAMs. You read them. They give you a basic instruction for fundamentally anything in defence, whether it's a weapon system or a tactic. And they would read this booklet and say, well, you should have been standing here and not there. You say, yes, but they teach you that. But room combat and essentially, combat operations might operate a little bit differently to what the PM says. There's a big gap between what you're taught and what you end up knowing.
And reality.
And it's, like anything, time
no
on the
manual
tools.
can say absolutely everything, can it?
Absolutely.
So, and how did you personally cope, or not cope with, but feel about the cross-examination experience you had?
I felt a little bit out on my own. I felt like defence had essentially put us in this position and then not really had any afterthought or aftercare. We'd all lost a mate. It was a horrible outcome. The poor family were dealing with that, and we're dealing with that grief and going through the inquiry at the same time. And in the back of your mind thinking, hey, essentially in another 3 or 4 weeks I'm going back to Afghanistan and I've got to have my mind on the job to do the next tour. So,
and do you feel as though you were able to vindicate your story through the answers you were able to give, or did you feel as though you were perhaps a little bit unable to do that because of the line of questions?
I felt like it was a very rigid process, and I felt like there were outcomes that were perhaps predetermined, and But again, I wasn't experienced in the process, so it was just a confronting thing, and my view of it is probably based on perhaps having that trauma at the time.
Did it compound your trauma, do you think?
I think it did.
Yeah, it sounds as though it could.
Yeah, I think it did, but it also gave me an understanding that essentially in a role like in the Special Forces, and I think it's relevant for me to say this, no matter what you do or how you explain an experience in that role or in combat, it's really hard to relay that back. And I think we see that now with the allegations of war crimes with the Special Forces. So Afghanistan, 15, 20 years ago is very different to the lens that perhaps an Australian legal practitioner might put on for 2025 with the benefit of hindsight and looking back and connecting dots that perhaps no one saw to connect at the time. So, and you also have a cultural lens that you have to overlay over that as well. What is probably acceptable and common practice in Afghanistan 15, 20 years ago would never be, accepted here in society in 2025. So I think it's a lensing issue that I think we need to be really careful of as a community at how we connect things that we think we understand, but perhaps we don't.
I completely understand that.
Yeah.
So that's an example of trauma through training.
Yeah.
What about the process of being in an actual kinetic combat? Yeah,
look, as the tours went on, we started to lose more blokes. I think there was a hardened position because and again, this is just my perspective of it, but we were fighting hard. We were risking our lives. We were helping these Afghani forces. We were training them, making them, prepare for their own eventual running of their own nation. And they were proud people, but as jobs went on, we had to have this partner force come with us all the time, and it was quite a difficult thing that we would arrest certain individuals or high-value targets or medium-value targets. We'd send them back through the system, and then there might be a mass prison breakout because the prison's run by local Afghanis in Kabul, and they get bribed and they're out, or they get shot and they're out. And it's hard not to think that, hey, we've lost a guy to an IED, an improvised explosive, or a Taliban fighter, and now they're back out. So I can sort of see how it jaded the view of.
So there's a real difference in there, though, isn't there, between defending your country, which is what you've signed up and sworn to do,
yes,
and defending somebody else's country.
Yeah.
And how did you relate to that emotional conflict?
I think for me it was both, because as a young kid I remember coming home late one evening and watching the second plane fly into the buildings in New York. So it and funnily enough, today is that anniversary. So I think that one singular moment, I always had in the back of my mind, I was there to serve my country and do that proudly. But I think with all of that happening, I'd probably, I think I've relayed that just for the context, but in terms of the probably biggest trauma I suffered over there outside of gunfights or living with a warlord who was up to some really weird stuff at night. I don't know if that's for public consumption.
Well, we can edit it out.
Yeah. That was trauma that I watched him exert on people, and I was living out there by myself. And even the
yourself,
US.
How did you end up living with a warlord on your own?
So I'd put my hand up to do a Pashto language course, an intensive language course before that third tour, and went to a meeting. We had what they would generally call a shura over there, and the warlord was there, and I thought, I'm going to try and test out some of my Pashto language skills. And
let's stop you there. So what is a warlord in the practical day-to-day sense?
Yeah.
Because I don't think many of the people listening to this are going to really know what it means. I mean, we have an idea of what it means. But
Afghan still is a tribal-based nation.
Yes.
So there's different parts of the nation that have different tribes. A lot of them hate each other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of probably history there, but they're really resilient, strong people, but they stay in their tribe. And I found it quite fluid with some of the people that would work with us. They would casually sort of say, in terms of the Afghanis that we're training, and one of those groups was a police group that was essentially run by a warlord. So again, you talk about the politics of the local area. There was a police sort of boss in the area where we were working or operating in southern Afghanistan.
Yep.
His name was Jim McGool or something like that.
So hang on, an Australian or Army police or an Afghani police
Afghani police sort of commander.
Okay.
But he wasn't really aligned with what we were achieving. So essentially, again, we found this, warlord called, and we backed him with equipment and I guess our force behind him.
In order to repel the policeman who wasn't aligned. Is that?
Yeah, look, they were all working together, but there were times there where, like our group would drive down the road of Tarankot and the ANA, the Afghan army, would hold everyone in almost an ambush position against the police. And so there was a lot of internal politics going on, as well as the politics of fighting the Taliban. And more often than not, you would have one of the Afghan police you'd be training, and they'd casually say that their brother was with the police and now he's with the Taliban and he wants to come back. So it was a very fluid sort of position for them.
Yeah.
And again, as a parent now, I can see that they were just trying to survive in their own way and feed their families. And I think often they go to whoever pays. In a large way, our presence there created a fairly huge false economy for parts of Afghanistan as well. So, locals had houses worth, probably $500,000 close to the base, which is just probably unheard of in Afghanistan, where maybe $1,000 is an annual income.
But how did that occur? The getting of the property worth that much? Was that?
I think it was a safety thing if they knew they were close to the base.
Okay.
I think also there was jobs internal to the base, so you'd have locals that would come in and work in the mess and as contractors, and which did bring an element of risk to the people inside the base. But in that third tour, I tried to show off with my language skills. I remember at the time. So
you're learning the Afghan language.
I'd done a 3-month course before I'd gone over on that tour.
And that was in order to sort of integrate yourself further, or just out of curiosity?
Integrate further. In high stress situations, it's hard often having an interpreter interpret everything. So you need to be able to, relay a message in simple terms, whether it's, stop, put your hands up, or what's your name.
So it's basically just to help you do your job better and safer.
Yeah. And we would have local interactions all the time. We would go into villages and provide medical support and take medics and doctors in to help the locals. And I think they were a bit curious about that. So, and it was about gathering intelligence. Like we had little systems that we would take retina scans of their eyes, fingerprints, and we would know instantaneously if they were responsible for any of the improvised explosives, because we would capture a lot of that equipment, send that make it safe, render it safe, and send it to the labs. They would take fingerprints off the tape and a whole number of things that would help us basically map out the community there to see who's who and who was up to what.
So coming back to the Warlord question of what is it? Is it a person effectively in charge, like the most charismatic or strongest leadership person in a tribe or a subset of a group of people that is effectively
I think there are probably ruthless, opportunistic business people.
But at the top of the particular tree that they are. Yeah,
whether it's a strong family, they have a position of power. You can't look at, we would call it corruption here in Afghanistan. It's just
survival.
It's just been, day-to-day person in Afghanistan.
And you lived in his house or?
In his house and at his police station called the Kandak. So we'd have one other and there was some quite confronting cultural differences, like they would have, like what they would refer to as a chai boy living with them. And basically these poor kids would go in and wear makeup and dance for them and all sorts of stuff. So we would often give them, we would carry a large portion of cash on us always, because if you ever get caught out or you have to escape somewhere, cash is king. It still is now. I'm doing renos at home. But I think that, those little things were confronting. But I remember when he invited us to stay, the bosses all sort of looked at each other, and I remember the American Green Beret there said, no, we're not doing this. And I thought, fuck, they're really going to send me out there to do it.
That's a good idea by them. Why am I here?
But it probably for me identified that, if anything, I was more unsure of who the bad people were in Afghanistan. So,
because to some degree, did he appear as though he could be a good guy among a whole lot of bad guys?
Well, he was paid essentially to secure the transport routes. There was a pathway called Route Bear. I think it was from Kabul to Tarankat, and it would supply all the fuel trucks, and the Taliban would always ambush this, and he kept it secure. And he was making tens of millions of dollars of US income a year. I believe his kids lived in London, and this guy was just, he was a bit of a badass. So I'd always heard rumours of him. Someone had fired an RPG rocket at a cab he was driving once, and it didn't detonate, and he pulled the warhead out and beat the guy to death with it. So he was quite a colourful character, and there was a level of intensity that probably kept him at the top there. With our added sort of, I guess I'm not sure if we were his supporters or henchmen at the time.
And what about that for you created some lasting trauma or lasting sort of memories that feel traumatic?
Yeah, it did. I think for me, there were traumatic things that he did that I was witness to, but I think it gave me a different worldview on what I was actually there doing. So I got to meet a lot more locals. I got to see how passionate they were about their own families and the survival of Afghanistan and the history of warfare there. And we were just seen as, short-term occupiers. I think they knew that we wouldn't last the long run, and noting that it was a 20-year conflict. We had a presence there it was our longest running conflict that Australia's been involved in. But pretty beautiful people, intense, but, ultimately incredible farmers, incredibly tough and resilient in the face of, incredible adversity. So, I think it's as a young Australian going over there, it was a real eye-opener to how lucky we are. They live in this lawless nation, and there was a bunch of us guys, like I said, in our 20s and 30s that were, essentially helping to call the shots over there. But I think on that trip, the trauma that probably stays with me the most is we're going out on a few last mission profiles. We were going into, a village to do a bit of a clearance. We'd heard that there were some Taliban fighters there. And as we flew in on this tour, improvised explosives were far more common. So we weren't really driving places. We were flying in, doing a hit or doing a job or a DA, direct action, and then flying out. And on the way into this one particular job, one of our Black Hawk helicopters with, I think it was about 15 guys on it, hit the deck. Was it hit by a rocket? No, I think it was just a proximity warning issue. They had it turned off. Oh, wow. And no, I'm no pilot, but it's been explained to me that because of the heat and the altitude and just the general conditions in Afghanistan, the aircraft really have to push hard to get the lift when they're full of all of us blokes in the back with all our gear. And we were going over the top of mountains, and then you sort of like a roller coaster gain speed. And my understanding is that it just hit the deck doing 200 plus kilometres an hour. And were you in another one and saw it? I was in one or two back. And I did see, I was in the back left-hand door. I saw this glowing thing come past, and apparently that was one of the rotors off the helicopter. And I remember looking down, we're only about a minute or two off target, and thinking, fuck, like, because you look at the map and you try and look out through your night vision. On earth is that? So this was at night? Yeah, at night, about 3 a.m. I'll never forget it, the 21st of June, 2010. And this helicopter hit the deck. I thought that initially they'd landed and I was just trying to understand why they were there, and there was no sort of known points I could see around them. In saying that, I wasn't, all the bosses on board would have been doing the same thing. And then we saw the fire start. So all of the helicopters essentially landed one after the other, and all of the wounded were thrown onto our helicopters and treated. And, the things I saw. So hang on. So can I just help here though? Yeah. So the helicopter became on flame, flame. And then did it land or did it crash land? No, it had crashed. It was in a basically like a 45-degree angle from the top of a mountain just straight into the deck. Wow. And then So then you all caught on fire. We all got down on the ground. The fire had sort of taken, it was in control at that time. And I remember that the door gunners, so they have these like Dillon Aerospace miniguns on the doors. They can just spew, hundreds and thousands of bullets in minutes. They're just amazing bits of equipment. But unfortunately, the door gunner, all their ammunition was in the fire and cooking off. So not only were we trying to evacuate people off the ground, there was essentially bullet fire from the helicopter. Fire. In other words, it was so hot it was exploding. Yeah, and firing out. I remember I took a knee. I pulled one of the blokes out with a friend who has since committed suicide. And I remember looking at the ground and watching all the dirt flick up around us as these bullets were cooking off in the fire, and it was a surreal moment. I still don't know how no one was harmed by any of those rounds cooking off. But how many of the people on the plane died in the incident and then afterwards? One American, I think it was one of the crew, he was killed in the accident, and 3 of our guys were killed in the accident. Just by the impact of hitting the ground? One on the ground was already deceased, and then I think 2 passed away in the helicopters on the evacuation. So, and what did you personally witness in that? I think pulling blokes out of the wreck and the fire, and it will all happen so quickly. And everyone, I think it's one of those moments, whilst it was horrible, I often talk about, with RSL or even my kids, they ask me about the war, and I always talk about the heroes around me. And there's this immense sense of comfort working from these incredibly dedicated, well-trained individuals that can turn their hand from combat to first aid, and the job that they did, those guys will forever be my heroes. So, they did everything on the ground, from using, cowling of that crushed aircraft as a stretcher to get guys on. And there was other blokes that jumped in the helicopters with them on the evacuation and literally gave CPR and kept those guys alive. And funnily enough, I'm on the board of RSL with, I think at the time, one of the Surgeon Generals of Defence, Dr. Charles New, and he has said that if it were not for the incredibly well put first aid by the guys on the ground, that we would have lost more. You're
being very humble, but by the guys on the ground, you mean you're one of them, and your team of commandos.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things in Special Forces. You don't
talk about yourself.
Yeah, you do, and I've always been lucky to be around that calibre of person in defence. I think there was a big, if we hadn't have all been able to respond the way we had on the day, we probably would have lost more blokes. But I think for me, knowing that going out into a job, didn't matter whether it was an ambush or an assault or a direct action, knowing that you've got those guys that you literally trust with your life. People say it, but when I say it, I mean it, because you know that they're the ones that are going to revive you or get the tourniquet on, and and we've got dozens and dozens of stories of that. Blokes been hurt, but for the skill of the operators around them and the shooters around them, they likely wouldn't have survived.
I mean, and this mission was towards a direct attack or direct target. So while all this, call it disaster, is going on, someone else also got to have their mind on what the original intention was. And to the degree that you've sort of highlighted that you're there, is there any threat that you've also got to deal with from it?
Yeah, so after the initial evacuation of the injured, guys from the ground, it was straight to fan out and secure the area. And we're extremely fortunate that no one was sitting waiting there for us.
I was going to say, because that sounds like that's also a huge possibility.
Yeah. And the Americans obviously held the asset bases, over there. So they had the helicopters, their equipment and their people are just incredible. And they worked with us shoulder to shoulder. So I remember after the evacuation, as the sun was coming up, the sky was just full of helicopters and flying over and giving us the thumbs up, and just incredibly dedicated people. And I grew up always hearing people, Australian veterans from the Vietnam era say, we would do very different to the Americans. But I have a deep and long-lasting respect for what they put themselves on the line for to help us, including their medical evacuation teams. They were just, incredible people. So, look, I think that event affected me, obviously. And I think it was just a sustained long-term exposure to trauma. And I don't think people compare trauma, but if you look at, I think all traumas might be different, like the road to that trauma might be different, but I think the outcomes are fairly similar. So even as a solicitor dealing with, clients who have had, traumas, I tend to relate to them quite easily, cautiously, but easy, because, you understand PTSD and the effects. So it allows me to help manage those clients and their outcomes and their expectations a lot better.
And we'll get to that. Before we just move on though, is the trauma that you're talking about and the after effect of it the sort of thing where it does actually become a vision that you see in your unconscious or conscious moments while you're trying to sleep or working. Is it that real for you that you would re-see this over and over again?
Yeah, I did for a fair few years. I was pretty keen to lean into the I guess the rehab side of it, if you will. And I had a good team of psychiatrists, psychologists. A lot of them are pretty fucking weird, I'll give you that. But I think it helped me confront a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
And I think becoming a parent later, your worldview changes. And
didn't you become a parent though throughout this Afghanistan period?
Yeah,
only after.
Yeah, okay. So I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity after. I'd met my now ex-wife on my last tour coming in and out of Dubai, so I was there for an extended period.
On an Emirates aeroplane, I understand.
That's right. Yes, yeah. So, and I think I'm fortunate that I had the family after, and was at uni and had time to be a dad and decompress. But I think PTSD has a different thing for everyone. I think it's, whether you have that fight or flight, you often want to fight, but then again, most veterans want to fight anyway. So I don't know if that's a trauma response or just a deep part of who I am, standing up for stuff.
You've obviously also you've got your training as a commando that allows you to do all this. Did the nature of you as a commando also help you attack PTSD, or is it whatever PTSD is for somebody, you just can't attack it, you have to live with it? And
it was a weird thing at the time because I had a lot of criticisms that I was openly leaning into it.
Criticisms of you?
What? I think guys at the unit perhaps saw it as a betrayal. You just got to keep going, and that's how you do it. And
you decided to speak up, didn't you?
Yeah, I decided to speak up. There were things happening that I didn't think were fair, and I was being...
To you or to the whole of you?
I think to the whole. I felt a sense of duty to make sure that other blokes were looked after. And it's a much more mature position now by Defence and by the unit, and I think they've got really great systems. And I'd like to think that I helped pave the road for a lot of that to occur. But
you took a lot of pain through that process because you took criticism that you didn't want and thought was unfair.
Yeah, look, I knew I was exiting. I had a medical discharge, on its way. I was studying at the time, so I was still dealing with physical injuries and that trauma. And I had a few support staff, which really burnt me up at the time because they weren't operators, but they sometimes I felt like in the system of special operations, they took on this outlandish persona of being the toughest person in the room, right? Like they had no sort of combat experience or anything. And I found them quite aggressive. And all I was asking for was some help. I wasn't asking for anything more.
Your help that you're asking for was to transit from this job into a new way of life.
Yeah.
As a parent being a parent was coming up as well.
Yeah, and they just acted in a fairly untoward manner. When they knew I was asking for certain things, it got messy. I was accused of, threatening self-harm, which never happened. Because I'd been on the counter-terrorism team, I woke up one morning to having, 8 or so police cars out the front, and they raided the house. And so it was a really nasty sort of, I guess, hard exit from Defence. And at that point, I just wanted to be away from it and restart my new life. Look, there were proceedings for that, and I was, ultimately, there was a settlement. I think they know they did wrong. And I'm glad to say that I hope that position helped inform a higher level of maturity from Defence when dealing with people exiting the system.
And how did all of that bring you towards the law?
Well, before it's probably a weird one. When initially I'd had my injuries in about, 2012, 2013, they'd sort of said, basically fuck off, go home. we don't want anyone else getting crook. Mental health was not, which was weird because while I was in it, I couldn't see that all these other people were having these issues. And then as I stepped back, I realised, and then some of those people eventually ended up committing suicide. So
they're very similar to you in the sense of the day-to-day experiences you had.
Yeah, and didn't want to lean into the public position like I did. And I knew that they were going to use that against me, and the best way to approach it was to own it. And I think that I'm really glad that I did that. The only negative part is I didn't want people to think that those injuries are who I was. So at the time I was dealing with probably 3 major things. One was my injuries. The other was...
What were they?
So I'd had some spinal injuries. I think just the constant loading and the pressure of the job and, incidents overseas, it had just sort of taken it's a fairly common issue. I've now had the full reconstruction and prosthetics in my spine. And
wow.
So it's been a life-changing thing. I'm not in pain all the time. So I had my injuries. I had the loss of my career essentially. And then probably the hardest hurdle to get over was the sense of loss of identity. So
so that's the third thing, but in the middle there, you've got the loss of your career.
Yeah.
Was that a loss that came about as a result of your injuries and a need to exit, or was it a choice that you exercised with those injuries and then moved into, I've got to stop doing this?
Yeah, I think I put my hand up and said I just needed a bit of help.
Yeah.
It wasn't really
emotionally.
Yeah, it wasn't met with help. I think I just felt pretty vacant. I think it's kind of, I found it like, walking into your home and none of your furniture's there and you don't know where to sit down. It's that same sort of emotional uncomfortability.
Was this the actual experience of the PTSD?
Yeah,
Is this the effect
think so.
of it? The consequence?
I felt void of emotion.
Yeah.
I wasn't, just didn't feel, I felt like a bit of a zombie really. And I think it was from constantly loading all those things. If I'd perhaps had some sooner intervention, which most people don't get because that gets you the ticket out the door. I would have been fine. At the time, I asked for a posting to the training school for a year or 2 just to reset.
Yeah.
And I would have been back into it. But yeah. So,
and do you feel as though this story of yours was similar to many that you were growing up with, in effect, doing the same job with?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's unavoidable.
It is
for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. The physical injuries are all very similar with people getting out. But in saying that, there's a lot of guys that I serve with that are still in now, and they're in much higher up the food chain there. And I think it's incredible that their bodies have held out and they've kept doing it, and they just have an incredible amount of knowledge that is such a benefit to that unit and the new people coming through. So,
are you happy you're not there in that position?
I am. I'm happy I'm not there because I've got my 2 kids, and I feel like it's always better to make the call yourself and move on to something else. So maybe I'm a bit of a career tourist now. I'm not sure, but but I had my fill.
But ultimately, isn't it the case that the military did actually support you in your law degree?
Yes, they did. I was told there was no programs for me. But one night I'd had a few beers, and I actually had the phone number for the Chief of Army at the time, who was Morrison, and I rang him up. And
so the Chief of Army is not Scott Morrison, because he's the Prime Minister.
Sorry, I think it was David Morrison.
Okay.
Yeah. But I rang him and said, basically, fuck you. I've done everything I've been asked.
So you actually had this conversation with him. He answered the phone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said, son, go and get some sleep. I'm going to call you in the morning. And he did. And I said, well, I don't want to go on a pension. I want to work. I want to feel valued. And I think, I've served you, and I just need this help, because no one in their transition system knew of any opportunities or any programs that I could, the response at the time was just see you later and sign the documents.
Yeah.
And he did. He helped me out. I got on what was called the Extended Transition Program.
Which did exist, it's just you didn't know about it?
Yeah,
or
no one
did
knew
it
about
apply
it.
to different people?
Different people. It became one of those things about who you know and who you can approach. And the system was still working against me at the time because I wasn't an officer. They didn't think that I'd be able to do law. So I did IQ testing, passed it somehow. I did that 3 times for them, passed it every time.
Each time. So they just made sure you weren't defrauding them each time you took it?
No, I think they just saw it as a class thing.
Really?
If I wasn't an officer...
they honestly put you through the test 3 times?
Yep.
The same test?
Yep.
As if to say that can't be right?
Yeah. And
really?
That's after I'd passed the admission test for the university as well.
Yeah, wow.
And that happened throughout. I felt there was a class issue. When you leave defence medically, they pay for other courses as well. And one of those courses I applied for was the director's course.
Yeah, the Australian
AICB.
Companies. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, well, look, you're not an officer, so it's unlikely you'd be on a board, which I think made me want it more. And I don't think it's I think it's changed now, I hope. But so I had these constant fights. I felt like I was fighting for that opportunity.
Eventually you got it and you were able to study the 3-year degree.
Mm-hmm. So I did a double degree. So I did law and commerce. I'd applied for law and commerce as a backup, and I think the university stuffed up and they sent me an offer for law and commerce. So I thought it was a happy accident.
Yeah.
And it was a great accident because I loved doing the commercial subjects. And I think commerce was a great filler for breaking down how boring law can be sometimes to study. But it works well because I think every business needs a law firm and every law firm essentially is a business. So
exactly. So now you're an owner of a law firm.
Yep.
And what's your life like on a day-to-day basis, and how do you reflect on today versus 20 years ago when you were in Afghanistan, or 15 years ago in Afghanistan?
I think it's the same. I think I'm still fighting for people. I've got more ability to determine what I do in the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't. Small business is hard. Big hours. A lot of people say you're lucky, or it's got nothing to do with it. I think my old man always said, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Mine said the same.
Yeah. So, but it's hard, I think, in a different way because it's a very privileged position to help people through other traumas in their life, be it a divorce, be it a business issue or recovering funds or anything, going through the court system, even for a DUI or a loss of license. So it's an incredibly traumatic experience for a lot of people. So I think having that life experience under my belt means that I can go in, I can fight for them, but I can also be pretty frank and fearless. And sometimes you've got to tell them, don't be a dickhead. And I'm really proud that I get to help them with that. And there's a lot of strategy behind that part too. And I think the military helped me a lot with strategy.
And how have you ended up sort of morphing that career as a solicitor also into the RSL?
Yeah, I was with RSL whilst I was at uni for a short time, and then having a young family, it was hard to do it all. And 2 years ago, I lost my brother to cancer.
Did you?
Yeah. So no, it's it was a really hard thing, and I think I was looking for that meaning again, and the RSL role came up, and I had a run at it, and
When you said a role, you mean the president?
Yeah, there was an election for the president's role, and I applied, and
for New South Wales.
Yes, to be the state president, and was elected and came in, and it's been a hard run there too because a few years ago they had the Bergen inquiry into RSL. It was about governance and transparency, and I really lived
hard on that rule, and I think it's important that that organisation that manages charitable funds is run appropriately, but not just appropriately, but sustainably.
Mm.
And I think that there's always an issue of various management teams coming into RSL. There's a hell of a lot of money spent on wages, which is appropriate, but we need to make sure that their focus is a sustainable long-term model that makes sure RSL is still there in 100 years for the next, several generations of veterans.
So what do you think you'll be doing in 10 years' time?
When I win Powerball, no, I'm not sure. I love working around startups.
Yeah.
I love my lobbying, and I think we have a fairly different approach to law. We do all the general stuff that everyone does, but I think there's a big gap in the market with what Paul and I have coined the legal political intersect, and I think that it goes beyond just a client coming in and saying, I want to achieve this, and you don't just say, hey, sorry, the law says A, B, and C. We offer the opportunity for us to go and lobby and put the case together for someone to have an alternate position that it's about, coming up with solutions for them, and if they want to take that on. I think it's lost on a lot of bigger companies. So they should be spending more on their lobbying positions and making sure that if something's not right, you advocate to change it.
And so how old are your children?
8 and 10, so Matilda and Mason.
Are you going to be advising them to look at the military as a career, or would you guide them towards or away? Or
probably not. So my partner, Alicia, has 2 little kids as well.
Yeah. And
her little boy, Benji, I think he would fit the army. He's a really athletic go-getter.
Yeah.
My son Mason, I'm happy with our kids doing any as long as they want to do it. I don't want to push them down any pathways, but I think the world's a pretty wild place at the moment too. So, I'd be just as happy if he was a builder or an engineer or whatever. So,
that is Mason named after Mason Edwards?
Yeah, he is. Always love the name, and I think it's a nice little thing that he has, and he's got such a gentle soul. He's such a happy little kid. So yeah.
Well, Mick, I think it would probably get to the end of the chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been amazing. So thank you, Mick Bainbridge. Thank you, Nudge Productions, and
thank you.
Speak to you again.
Cheers.
Cheers.